So Mark, as we move forward, I've got a note that says practice mode only, attendees cannot join until you broadcast. Is that anything to do with some of the things that we talked about need to be done in the beginning?
Yep, so that's what I'm going to do right now with your permission, is to start the webinar, which gets us out of practice mode. We're now live streaming, so if it's okay with you, I'll start the webinar and that'll let the attendees in, okay?
Great.
All right, so and that also means that we're recording as well as live streaming.
Okay, great. And it's good to know that that can be done by either the host or the co-host or anyone.
Yep.
And I see in the attendees, there's Rich and Robert, a couple members if we want to promote them.
Yep, doing it right now, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, long time no see.
I know. Michelle and I were both.
What'd they decide to do? I took a break.
They took no action, but it looks like they're going to approve.
Okay.
On what?
110 West 88th Street, that replacement townhouse.
I see.
That is terrible.
Yeah.
So some of them really didn't like it, right, Mark? I mean, that sounded like, but I guess enough.
Oh, yeah.
Felt like it was okay.
Hi, Kay.
Yeah, only one or two of them.
Yeah.
And they all disliked different things.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just waiting, just as everyone knows, we're just promoting a handful of members from attendees into panelists, and then we'll jump in.
I saw something on Facebook where people were invited to, were told to come to the meeting today.
Okay, well, they're welcome to come.
Yeah, I'm just telling you.
Yep.
What it has to do with the shelter, I would imagine, correct?
Yes. They referenced that, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. What did they reference?
I said I saw something on Facebook, Jay, that invited the community to this meeting, and they referenced the issue on our agenda about the women's shelter on West 59th Street.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we jump in? Let's formally start the steering meeting. I think I sent out our agenda. My goal for this meeting is to make it very both informative but efficient. Thus kind of a straightforward agenda. What I plan to do is give a little bit of an update, which of a handful of things that I'm doing, but I'll get in front of just the chair reports. You know, my thought was to combine a section that sometimes asks for an update, but also talks about agenda items. So I'll go through all of the different committees and either ask, both of the co-chairs or one. You guys can either choose or both speak, just anything you want to share, and then specifically any agenda items for the next full board when we get to that section. So if you want to just think about that or figure out who's going to speak, or we're working on it together. So the first thing I just wanted to touch base on is just to give a general update. And an unusual update is that as a new chair in sort of the middle of the process, it's just been a very busy 10 days or so. So I've been had lots of meetings with a handful of the elected officials, met with many committee members, started the committee process, speak to lots of agencies. So I want everyone just to be rest assured that I'm in the thick of it. It's been a busy process, but it's been very enjoyable. So I've enjoyed it. It's been very informative, and it's been several people, many people very helpful. So I thank everyone who has been helping me along the process. Again, we're off and running from that perspective. I also thought just to give a little bit of update during my speech, or whatever you want to call it. I talked about 3 things that I wanted to focus on, and I just thought to give very quick updates because I have been focusing on them. In terms of, advocacy and projects, I have done a combination of things. Again, I've had multiple meetings with elected officials, and each time we've talked about maybe ideas or things we can work on together. I've spoken to several of the members, so some proactively, some reaching out to me, but we've had conversations. I've enjoyed them, but the idea is, again, are there things that we can actively do? And there's 2 or 3 that sort of have started to resonate. I think it's premature to bring them up, but I've started setting up some phone calls and bringing in some committee members for the appropriate type meetings. And my hopes is to continue that process. The second part was just, maximizing, I sort of said, participation from all, and that's going to be a process. But I did want to share one thoughts regarding a couple things. We have some co-chairs open. My goal is to fill them over the next couple weeks. I think it's important. So that will, again, get more voices in the room. And then one thing that was common during my conversations leading up to the election is several people just expressed a desire to either move committees, whether they just wanted to be on different ones, felt they could be more useful, and or felt their domain expertise was more relevant. And I would like to encourage. I'm completely open to that. I mean, I think we're all volunteers. I think it's important. We like the committees we're on. I'm sure it's a lot funner to work on the things that we think also is interesting. So I have reached out and spoke to some people, but I'm opening this up. My goal is to sort of work on this over the next couple of weeks. And if somebody who I didn't speak to has an opinion or wants to move to a different committee, please reach out. Again, my goal is to maximize that as much as possible. A couple of the committees are a little large, so that could be a little bit of an issue, but as much as I can make that happen, that would be my goal. Again, is to get people across multiple committees, particularly the ones that they want. And then just one of the things we talked about was being efficient and growing the resources, the way that we sort of work as a company, or I should say as a board. And we've been focusing a little on the website, and I've had some meetings on that. We've been focusing a little bit on data. I've had some meetings on that. I'm not prepared, or that's sort of a work in progress. I did have a really good meeting with Penny, which was, I thought, very productive, and she had ideas as well. So that is going to continue to move forward in sort of how we work in this pandemic that hopefully ends soon, but we're still going to be remote, and it's still sort of challenging us in how we communicate. So I think sometimes it can be an opportunity in how we do that as well. So those are just the 3 things in a very quick period of time that has been the focus. 2 things to specifically speak about. Zoom has been a big topic. One was sort of transitioning and realizing what I need to do to sort of take that over. If you notice that Mark and I are still sharing those duties, because we found out that, as you'd imagine, it's not as simple to just turn on a switch. So we are looking at that. And at the same time, we're trying to look at sort of different ways, just change the dynamics of how that works. And I want to thank Christian. He's been incredibly helpful in terms of, we're starting to look at what different new functionalities there are. And I think some of the, one of the things that we've taken is, hoping to get the committee members to take a little bit more ownership. But this is sort of a work in progress. But one of the things we also sort of thought about, and I thank Christian for offering, is we're thinking about doing either an optional webinar, number 1, for co-chairs, if they want to kind of learn the functionalities or the nuances, and then perhaps even just one for all board members. I think some people know Zoom a little bit better than others. I've used technology for a while, but Zoom is new to me, so I'm learning as the process went along. So I'm going to work with Christian and offer probably 2 different webinars. And again, if it's one person, great. If it's more than that, more the merrier. But we just thought that would be very a good idea for all of our members. And then the last thing is, I wanted just to make an announcement. One of the things I wanted to do was just make sure. I wanted to honor thank Richard and honor him for running, and then also know that a lot of people supported him. So I tried to think of what is a role that he could take. He's already co-chair, so I can't make him co-chair. So we had a conversation, and I offered Richard if he would be the parliamentarian moving forward for the foreseeable future. I want to put the caveat that this is nothing to say negatively about the great job Shelley has done. He's been a great resource, and I thank him. But I just thought it would be a nice gesture. I know a lot of people believed in Richard, and I do too, and I felt it was important that he be in the room moving forward for some type of role. So I just wanted to thank Richard, thank Shelley for his, for his role, and I'm sure he'll still have lots to say, but I wanted to thank Richard for accepting that, and I'm excited about that moving forward, and I've already called him a couple times, so that process has begun. So I will pause there if there's any questions about anything I said. Otherwise, I was going to move on to the chair reports. Okay, so I'll take that as I like to call the Bueller no, and move on.
Stephen, may I just jump in for a quick, there's a question in the chat about the chat not being visible to some people. That's not something we did. I don't know what's going on with that.
No, that's not true. That's something I did. That's something I talked to Stephen earlier today, and I wanted to see how it worked. And that's what it does work.
Okay.
So on that topic, we had said at full board that we would talk about chat, and I do think it should be a conversation for tonight.
So it is a conversation. My sense, Christian, I guess I didn't realize that we were going to do it for today.
And I reversed it. I just wanted to
Give it a try.
you give it a try, yeah.
Okay. And we are going to talk about our meetings, full board meetings, and formatting chat, so we can talk about it. And people should be able to go back to it. There are different levels of functionality that we have been investigating in terms of options, but it should be now visible to all. Okay, so I wanted to move into the chair reports. I'm just going to go in order in terms of the order will be as we have those in the beginning of the month. So for Housing Committee, it's either Louisa, Melissa, or both. Do you guys want to share, again, any thoughts and or anything that could be on the full board? I don't think you had any resolutions.
I don't think anything for the full board. We do have some thoughts on topics that will be shared, I think, potentially with other committees. So we'll reach out separately to the committee chairs to try to start finding a good time for those conversations.
Great. And I would comment, I mean, I thought, I was at that meeting, and I would, we do this when I was running co-chair YEL, but I thought it was a very smart approach. Melissa and Louisa sort of thought about 3 or 4 months worth of topics. And I know sometimes we're always pressed from month to month to month, but sometimes taking an approach of thinking about what the next 2 or 3 months could look like could put less pressure, particularly on the committees that are coming up, have to come up with different topics. So I thought that was a really good idea, and would recommend to other chairs to have those conversations either at the end of the meetings, or even maybe even putting on I always put it on every YL agenda, the topic, discuss future topics for meetings, because it's very helpful to get ideas from other people. Okay, transportation, either Andrew or Howard or both.
Well, I will just tee it up, and then Andrew could talk about the mass transit issue, which was the highlight. We didn't have any resolutions come out of the meeting earlier in the month. We had a discussion of mass transit, which again, Andrew will tell everyone about. We talked about the perils of cars turning left when there are pedestrians going through a crosswalk with a green light. And we're going to have a presentation on that at our next meeting. And since this is an important safety issue, I encourage everyone to attend. And that was pretty much the meeting. So Andrew, if you could talk about an issue that's near and dear to all our hearts, mass transit. Andrew, you have to unmute.
Now I'm unmuted. We had a good portion of our meeting devoted to mass transit issues. I gave an MTA update on various cleaning methods, various subway car issues. We know a little more today than we did the day of our meeting. For instance, we know that the fare will not be raised at the vote this Thursday. In February, we know that tolls will go up. That will probably be a large debate, because all the onus for the fare hike will be on motorists as opposed to riders. But most advocates and most folks believe that was the right way to go. We have been raising fares every other year since 2009, but 2020 was anything but an average year. So it will be put off till at least the fall. is the reference that I'm getting from meetings today. I do know that the MTA just got a grant to look into things. It's like an innovation grant, so it's going to be great. They're going to look at things that will get riders back from COVID. They're going to continue to do the cleaning they've been doing. They're testing a very exciting electrostatically charged air filtering system on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, which is a game changer if it proves successful. So we're all hoping that it is. So far it has been, and other systems around the world are now trying it out as well. We have some new subway cars coming. If you're a C-train rider, you've noticed the new R179s are making up a considerable portion of that run, where you once had all very old cars that jerk started and your neck went flying, even if you stayed still. So we have some good things happening. We also have a friend in the White House effective tomorrow, and we now have a former DOT commissioner as second in command at the U.S. Department of Transportation, Polly Trottenberg. That with our Senator Schumer being the majority leader in the Senate, these things all bode pretty well for mass transit. And I'm hoping that they do. I won't take any more time, but I hope to have somebody speak on cleaning and the various methods that are being used and how frequent it is. And yes, it requires the system to be closed from 1 to 5 a.m. And we do need a timetable and metrics for bringing back 24/7 service, because this is, after all, the city that never sleeps. I'll end there.
I do see, Robert, did you have a quick question for Andrew?
Yeah, I appreciate the update, and I'm having to go to the Bronx a lot because I have new clients in the Bronx, so I'm on the subway a lot, more than I'd like to be. And the encouraging thing is that I have not seen one person without a mask on, not one.
Well, I have.
But wait, Andrew, I mean, these subway rides, they're jammed. And so I'm standing there, everybody with their mask on, and that car is just jammed.
What line are you riding, Robert?
I take the number 2 up to Tremont, and then I got to get on the bus to 42 Crosstown. So
Yep.
it's a long ride. And
I have noticed that trains to the Bronx are very, very crowded.
wow. So, I mean, your interest, you offered it that you're going to get a speaker on cleaning and all of that, but on the scheduling with respect to traffic, managing the flow of people, is there any talk on that where it means more frequent cars, more frequent trains, or what? Because the congestion is scary. To me, it's scary.
So there has been talk of so-called right-sizing service. Unfortunately, that's just another euphemism for service cuts. Now, there has been a little bit less service in some places because some folks have gotten ill and crews are not available to run those trains.
Right.
I'm going to learn more on Thursday about what right-sizing down the road means. There possibly could be less frequent rush hour trains since fewer people are traveling in the rush hours, but more frequent off-peak service. I'm going to try to find that out, Robert. But are you finding that level of crowding every time you go, or was it just one day in particular?
No, every time, because my schedule is erratic. It could be any day of the week.
What time of day are you traveling?
And I try to make my outside trips after 1 o'clock. So I try to travel between 3 and 5. And
3 and 5 p.m.
And then
Okay.
I'm coming back by 6:30. I'm on my way back home. And it's just, quite frankly, it's more jammed on the trip back than the trip up. And because I guess people are working up there and they're going back to Brooklyn, wherever they're going. But
Sure. And where are you getting on the west side?
I get on at 96th Street and
Yep.
Broadway.
Yep. I'll look into that, Robert.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So preservations, Kay and/or Michelle?
We just have, well, we met with Parks. We just have the one thing to bring to full board. It's from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Michelle, anything you want to say about it?
No, I think you got it. Or unless
Concerns
Larry
the,
wants to say something.
The southern facade
Mm-hmm.
of the museum.
I know Mark often sort of asked if he thought anything would be, what's I'm not gonna say problematic,
Controversial,
or
yeah.
challenging or whatever. And I certainly was on this and seems pretty straightforward. So I'm gonna put a big no next to that column. So,
Yeah. We're the last of all the community boards that were approached with
Okay.
this application.
great, okay. Okay, let's go. Now we're moving to meetings that haven't happened yet. So you may give maybe a little bit of update and/or if you anticipate a resolution.
Stephen,
Stephen,
our meeting happened already.
No, I'm moving on. Oh, I'm sorry.
Adam meeting, Stephen, business and consumer issues.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got cut off at the top and now I realized that BCI wasn't there. So my apologies.
That's okay, we're here. So let me.
I'm new at this. I get one meeting to sort of
you're doing
complain or something, but it got cut off on the top, so I apologize.
Gotcha. Well, you see, then
BCI, Linda or
you
Christian.
need to cut you off. It's okay, we're good. We had a very interesting meeting because it was the first time in a year that there were no applications, no SLA applications, and the pre-COVID no sidewalk cafe applications. So what we decided to do, there had been a lot of comments at full board about what is the community board doing about commerce and small businesses and how can we support them. So we had a meeting about that. Unfortunately, not a lot of the public came. We did put it up on NYC Link, and we put it up on, it was on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and of course it was on the agenda. But it was a really good discussion with people who knew what they were talking about. It was amazing. And what we are talking about for next month is actually putting together like a town hall with retail and restaurant owners and just hearing what they have to talk about. In addition, we also had, we were asked, it was suggested that we put together a list of resources. I know they're available, but we can do it for the community board too, comprising how to get a hold of SBA, how to look into the PPP. So those were the things that we were talking about. Christian?
Yeah, it was also suggested that we put a list of specific restaurants for people to support because they are doing poorly, but that's not something we can do.
Right.
We can publish a list of restaurants that are available that people can try to support.
Yeah. So that was about it. We did have one last liquor license renewal, but we don't really see liquor license renewals anymore unless the community complains about them. And this particular one had more of a political edge to it rather than a community edge because the community had never complained about it. And that was the Trump International Hotel and Condo. And it didn't apply to the Jean-Georges restaurants, Nougatine, et cetera, but it did apply to their hotel banquet groups, their hotel bars. Obviously not a lot open, but we looked at it in terms of the community hasn't complained about that. It's not the owners who are going to be in trouble. The owners are have their own troubles, but it was really, we looked at the staff, the catering staff, the bar staff and all, and we felt that would be punitive to them. So the entire committee unanimously said, this is a renewal that we haven't had community complaints on, and we're gonna send it back. Am I correct on that one?
Yes, I'm gonna allow the regular process to take place.
Right, the regular process. He's much more eloquent than I am about it. Okay, so that's about it. Anybody else? Did I miss anything, guys? Nope.
Great.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
And be aware, we're gonna have that town hall.
Okay, and now we'll move to the future ones. Apologize for that. And Richard, I have land use. Any thoughts or do you anticipate anything for the full board?
We don't anticipate any resolutions, but we are about to embark on what will be a lengthy process that will involve several board committees. The city council has produced a 50 some odd page report called Planning Together, in which they advocate to replace all of the various planning, not replace the agencies, but the functions with a more centralized approach to planning and developing a 10-year plan for the city. The report itself is very dense. It is hard, even if you have a familiarity with land use, and even if you know how these people write, it's hard to get your arms around it. There seems to be an emphasis on making land use and planning issues more democratic. That is, less focused on some of the wealthier areas in town and trying to develop some of the outer borough areas and areas in Manhattan that are also not wealthy. We're going to start looking at it tomorrow night, and we're going to start with a presentation by George Janes, who's an architect, city planner. He's been used extensively by groups that are trying to hold back these super talls. He's been gracious enough to agree to come and talk with us. And I should add, we got a grant to pay him, so we're able to reimburse him for his time. But I suspect it's a labor of love for him anyway. But in any event, the meetings tomorrow night, it's going to be a kickoff. This is going to be around for quite a while. There are several issues that we're going to need to dissect, but first we have to get our arms around the project. We may have a few other agenda items, time permitting, but that's the main one.
Thank you, Richard. I'm just looking to see, nobody has questions. Okay, Clary, Parks.
Sure. So in this month, and you're quite right, we haven't had our meeting yet. It's going to be a week from yesterday. It's the 25th this month because of the holiday on Martin Luther King Day. We have 4 items on the agenda. One of them is pretty routine, but good news, and that it will probably have a simple resolution for the board. There are a couple of path areas of paths in Riverside Park that are going to get renovated, which is a good thing. They desperately need it. So that'll be a resolution. One of the other things we have on, and I hope the public will come, and it is joint with our Transportation Committee, is a broader discussion of the helicopter problem than we had at the full board. The Transportation Committee last month had a resolution that we were happy to adopt at the full board that was narrowly aimed at the city actually promoting these tourist helicopters through the, I think through the city's business development folks, Economic Development Corporation. But we're going to have a broader discussion with the Stop the Chop group about all the issues, not only noise, but pollution and possible and pending proposed legislation, et cetera. But I think maybe the most interesting thing to mention just briefly for the public and members of the board is for the first time, we're going to have an agenda item discussing the possibility of security cameras in Riverside Park. There are none, or at least there are none that I know of, none in our neighborhood. There have just been several varied kinds of very concerning criminal situations in or near Riverside Park. Recently, there was the graffiti vandal who has caused enormous amount of work. The guy sounds a bit crazy, but graffiti all over the place. There were two armed robberies at knife point at Riverside Drive and 74th or 5th Street. It was 2 kids who eventually were caught. They may be back on the street. I don't know if they're in detention. And then another completely different kind of criminal situation that has caused me to say, hey, we should at least start talking about the possibility of security cameras in Riverside Park. So we're going to have John Harold, who's the administrator of Riverside Park, come and talk with us. I suspect the first thing we'll encounter is being told there's no infrastructure that would make it readily possible to install security cameras, but we want to start at least a discussion about those possibilities and those issues and see how people feel about those questions. That's really all I would say tonight. Barbara?
Clary, I was just wondering why you didn't also bring in someone from Central Park to discuss this. It's an interesting issue. And as far as I know, there are no security cameras there either.
I think that's right, Barbara, but the particular incident, variety of incidents that we have in mind at this point are all Riverside Park incidents, and Central Park has, you know, completely different administration. And it's a very valid question, but I want to start with Riverside, see where we go with that. And we will what I certainly will do though, and I think it's a very good point, we'll invite somebody from Central Park, we'll notify them and ask them if they would like to participate in the meeting.
Good,
thanks.
Or maybe even if they can't, just make a comment on what the
Sure.
process is for
Yeah,
that.
there are a number of different contacts we have with Central Park, and I think it's a very good idea to
Great.
notify them and ask them to be with us.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And now we will close with HHS, and I believe Shelley will be doing
Yes.
talking.
Thank you. This month's meeting on Tuesday, June 26th, is going to be focused on the vaccine distribution. We've attended various test and trace meetings and other meetings around the city. And as everyone knows, the rollout's been somewhat chaotic, very chaotic for many people. So we are going to have the city test and trace group, council member Mark Levine, who's the head of the health committee of the city council, people from hospitals and other health related facilities and agencies. We're formulating questions for them. If people have specific questions they'd like to pose, we may have them already or not. Please feel free to, I guess, send them to me. I can easily be remembered at sfine50, that my age? 50@aol.com, sfine50. And because we'd like your questions answered and to have the people there prepared to answer them. And if not, if there are questions that those people can't answer, to find the right individuals while we still have a couple weeks left. So we expect it to be an interesting, informative, and lively meeting, and we welcome everyone to attend.
Thank you, Shelley. Do you think there's any chance at any type of resolution coming out of this, or?
It probably will end up in a resolution, probably to urge various individuals, elected individuals and agencies to do things a little better. But right now, we can't predict. Maybe things will be just fine by then. Ha ha ha. And so we wouldn't want to preempt, but we'll be prepared.
Okay.
It won't be a terribly controversial resolution, I'm sure.
Okay, well, let me know, and I'll be there, but just trying to anticipate as we start thinking about our full board.
Certainly.
Great.
Stephen, we have one more committee, budget and strategy.
Okay.
That doesn't usually meet. We don't usually have resolutions, but we do work on the district needs statement. And at some point, you, Beverly, Penny, and I need to set up a meeting, because we should be starting certainly in February to be meeting with every single committee to get them started on the working on the district needs and the budget priorities for the next budget, which will be 2022-23.
Got it. Okay, and I'll include this note to self to include this as part of the updates. And just anything else to add, or that's the update. Great. Okay. So we will move on. Speaking of the full board meetings, did want to touch base on a couple things. We've had our first executive team meeting, and one of the conversations, or a lot of the conversation, has been just thinking about a couple things. One is just the board meeting and efficiencies, and we may tweak some of the ideas and processes. There was lots of feedback, again, during sort of the calls that I had. And so we're talking about them. I don't really have anything to update other that we're talking about them. We're thinking about adding maybe some times, some tentative start times to some of them, to the different subject matters, so people will just have a sense of expectation, but we're going to finalize that. And the other conversation that we've had a little bit was chat. And let me give you an update, because we don't have a resolution, or when I say we don't have a finalization, but let me tell you about the plan. There has been concerns about the chat that has been raised. We have tried to keep the chat open because I think we as a board all feel it's a useful tool in many ways, and we want the community to be able to communicate as much as possible. It's also been somewhat of a challenging, particularly over the last couple meetings, where I think there's been some, whether we want to call it crosstalk or talk between different attendees, some of that has been escalated. So we're trying to find a balance. What we did was had a conversation as an executive committee. I have reached out to the borough president to ask for guidance in terms of any formality, any documentation, what they're seeing. They offered a very quick feedback, and I'm going to get some more. We're also reaching out to other community boards to find out what they're doing so that we can understand, because I think we want to make a very thoughtful, measured approach. So we are gathering information. Christian as well, who was testing it earlier in the meeting. We're looking at sort of different types of formats that we can look at that may allow us to keep the chat open, but certain different functionalities. So that is the process that we're going through. We're going to meet again and gather all this information and try and come up with a consensus of what we would recommend or talk about. So that is our process. I have heard some people have varying different opinions, and I can assure you that there are a wide variety of them. But that's the process. And as we gather the information, I think we're going to try and make a recommendation, and I'm hoping that we will have a unanimous decision moving forward. So if there's other people that want, so that's the update. If anybody wants to add additional thoughts, they can also feel free to send them in an email, and I'll share them with the executive committee. But I'll also pause if people want to discuss or offer it with different committee members. I'm just looking to see if there's any raised hands.
Richard wants to speak.
Robbins has his hand up.
Great.
So, Stephen, I thought you had said at full board that we would be talking about it at steering, and I know that there are a few community members who have been writing in chat that they have feelings about it. I feel, I had been a real strong proponent. I think that chat can be a really useful tool, but I've gotten to the point where I just feel that it's been so abused and such a distraction. And in meetings, there's just such a constant flow of chat that there's no way to both pay attention to the meeting and pay attention to chat, which ends up being a distraction, definitely for community members, but especially for board members. And so my feeling is the way that Christian had it set up at the beginning of this meeting, where board members can chat to everyone, but community members can only chat to board members, not to each other, would be a good solution to allow community members to have some input, but not to have this just constant chatter between community members amongst themselves. I do feel very strongly that board members, when we're typing in chat, should never type just to each other. We should always make it public. I think that would be an open meetings law issue if we were chatting but not making it available to the public. And I'm seeing already community members are disagreeing. I just don't think that we can have a forum that can just go off on any subject. We'd never have a live meeting where community members could have a direct input to every board member that we would be expected to pay attention to instead of paying attention to the actual meeting. And I really regret saying this because I really like the tool. I think it is great to have a channel where there can be input, but I just think it's just completely impossible to make it work.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I see 3 cyber hands and 1 hand raised. I'm gonna let Shelley speak first because I see his hand raised, and then I see Melissa, Barbara, and Sarah with their cyber hands. If I missed anybody, it just means you're on the second page of my visual and I don't see you raising your hand. So we'll make sure we get to it. Shelley.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, I suggested we do away with the chat. My reasoning, which was referred to by Richard, if we had a face-to-face meeting, chat would be rude. Okay, people wanted to write to each other and pass notes. It'll be a little rude, but not too much, but certainly to express themselves. We have a process for expressing themselves. If people want to speak on an issue, they can sign up. If people want to speak in the public session, they can. I don't think there's any reason to have the chat in terms of public policy. And second, I believe that questions and answers might be helpful when things are not being mentioned and people have something. So if there's a need for input, it should be based on questions to be answered that might help the discussion. But I think we ought to do away with it. I think it's destructive and it's distracting, and it's not good public policy.
Thank you, Shelley. Melissa?
Yeah, I agree with what was just said, so I don't want to repeat it. But I also want to point out that the live stream on YouTube has a place to chat as well. So perhaps a compromise would be to say for people who feel like they want to engage with each other, you can do that on YouTube. It doesn't have to be on a meeting where it pops up on my screen and I cannot hide it and it's very distracting.
It's a very good idea. Barbara?
Well, Shelley basically took the words out of my mouth. I agree with him completely. So thank you, Shelley. I find the chat extremely distracting. People are making points that they would never have the opportunity to make were they in a real full board meeting where we were meeting face to face. And I just think we should do away with it. We could have it for sign-in, perhaps, you know, when people first arrive, if we need to take attendance that way, but I think it should be limited, very limited.
Great. Sarah, a couple more raising. I do see you, Louisa. I do see Clary as well, but Sarah is next.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo all of that and to say again, in in-person meetings, we would never have community members or board members shouting out during the middle of a conversation. There are public comment sessions. You can comment, you can sign up to comment publicly at each issue or at the full public comment session. And I don't think that board members should be using the chat either, really. I mean, we should be speaking when we want to speak and then listening to our fellow board members. Thanks.
Thank you. Louisa, and then we'll go Clary, and then I see Andrew has his hand raised too. You gotta unmute yourself, Louisa.
Sorry. I agree with Shelley and everybody. What we want to be doing is mimicking an actual meeting. And during an actual meeting, we would not be having people shouting from the audience. There was a specific time that people can sign up and talk and organize their thoughts and direct their thoughts directly at the community board members as opposed to each other.
Muted myself. Sorry about that. Clary, and then there's a handful of other names, Andrew, Ken,
I
Julie,
mean,
Linda.
just briefly, I agree with all of the recent board members have just said. I had a couple of incidents over the years in real meetings of the Parks Committee or its predecessor, where there would be one or more really unruly members of the public either denigrating each other or denigrating the issue or denigrating the board members or whatever, where, it got pretty tough. I have to say, you either shut up or you leave the meeting. And it wasn't easy, but succeeded. And all of this stuff in the chat is just reminding me of that. So I agree. It's inconsistent with the manner in which, with any attempt to be the best substitute for an in-person meeting.
Thank you. Andrew?
Thanks. Excuse me. So I agree to a degree with a lot of what has been said, but I also think as meetings evolve and you move into new forums, the better you can engage the public is probably the better for public discourse and helps inform our work. That being said, just reading some of the quick comments in the chat right now from members of the public, they feel like maybe they're not always being heard or don't have the opportunity. And I would just counter to them, it really is a challenge being a board member, trying to pay attention to the agenda and everything that's going on, to keep up with the speed in which the comments are coming through. So I feel like sometimes I may miss important comments in the chat because there's just so much going on. So my thought would be, one, and Stephen, you may have suggested it, if it's something directly related to this part of the meeting, maybe there's a way for that to be communicated, from a member of the public. But perhaps there's a separate chat board or some function for the community to be able to communicate without it really interrupting our meeting. And the final thing I would say is, like the city council or many legislative bodies, when they hold hearings, the public can sign up to testify in person, which is the equivalent, I would say, of signing up for the public session here or commenting on a specific agenda item, or they can just submit written comments, which are just read. So perhaps if people want to do more than just communicate back and forth, which is what I think a lot of the chat is, but want to get a direct message of material use to the board, perhaps there's a separate function where it doesn't require a response, but we're able to take their comments under consideration, whether at that meeting or a following meeting. So people feel like they have a different forum, if that all makes sense.
Thanks, Andrew. We've got 5 hands up now, so we'll go down. I'm just going to go top to bottom. So it's Ken, Julian, Linda, Roberta, then Christian is in my chat. That's the way that I see it. So Ken?
Yeah, I agree with most of what's been said. I think the chat is basically unnecessary. We would never have it in an in-person meeting. And I think it's an invitation to inflame passions unnecessarily. But having said that, it has served a great purpose when we needed to, for instance, provide a link to everybody to a pertinent report in a meeting or something like that. And so I'm wondering if it's possible, maybe this has been discussed, to turn the chat on for a brief time in the beginning of the meeting and maybe turn it off and then turn it on at the end of the meeting, or turn it on and off at the discretion of whoever's running the meeting.
Thank you. Julian.
Thank you. I don't want to be repetitive here, but Ken brings up an interesting point. And I think when it comes to the chat, I don't think we want to close off the ability for community members to provide input to the board. I think that's the exact opposite of what we want to do. And I think if it involves extending public comment sessions where community members are able to speak, I saw some comments in the chat right now about how it's currently been moved to 60 seconds. I think normal speaking times are actually at 2 minutes. We just move them based on the length of meetings. So I think extending actual public comment section, and we can still, I think Rich's solution was really great. We can still keep the chat open for community members to submit questions or submit concerns or written comments directly to the community board members. It's just not about having the back and forth between community members, which I think is unproductive. And like, I've personally been harassed and attacked in the chat before, and it's really hard for board members to moderate that. And there's also like amazing moments when public officials come and they share links and resources in the chat and they get buried within like 5 seconds because the messages are going really fast. And so like cleaning that up a bit, I think it can streamline the process and still make sure community voices are heard, and also make sure that these resources get distributed to the community in the same way that like the table at the back of board meetings used to offer a lot of great resources.
Great. Linda?
First of all, we're in an unusual period. To begin with, steering committee was never populating. People who came to the steering committee were generally the co-chairs of the committees, because what it is ostensibly a review of the meetings and the planning for the next full board meeting. So we're in a whole new territory here because everybody's here. We've got a whole bunch of folks who normally wouldn't even be at steering if we were in person. That's one. Two, there's got to be a way to have a sign-in sheet that replicates or functions, replicates the function of what our sign-in sheets do at full board, because our steering committees have almost become like full board meetings. And so maybe there's a way, maybe Christian, we can figure out a way to have a sign-in sheet at the beginning of the meeting. Don't forget that sign-in sheet is cut off when the meeting begins. So people come in early, as they've always done at full board. They sign in. If it's related to a business issue, they sign in for that. Or if it's a public speaking thing, they sign in for that. But it's always worked in person, and I think it could work now. And you're right, the chat is distracting, and sometimes it can be a little intimidating. So we're in new territory here to begin with. But I think that if we organize this well, everybody gets to speak instead of react to comments. Thank you.
Just to clarify something there, Linda, the public cannot come in early. The way we have our meeting structured right now, they cannot come in early. They are admitted at the beginning of the meeting. But we do have the sign-in sheet that we've been using a full board for the past few meetings. And I believe that's the way to go.
Yeah.
People kind of sign in to speak.
We have a sign-in sheet, and then everybody can sign in instead of just reacting to everybody else's comments. You know, it's kind of knee-jerk thing that's really distracting. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And then the last hand I see is Roberta.
Hi. So I agree with mostly what everyone said. Sometimes when we have meetings, we ask for a show of hands, like how many people are here that are, raise your hand because you're for something, raise your hand because you're here against something. So I don't know if there's a way to use the chat for that. There's also a Q&A section so people can ask questions, which we can which we can answer during the program. I find sometimes the chat, it just goes back so fast that it distracts from the meeting. And I think, we need to develop a way where the chat, maybe through a Q&A and maybe a couple of times during the meeting, if it's appropriate, we throw the chat open so people can say, raise your hand if you're for X and raise your hand if you're against X. I don't know, but I find the chat often very confusing. But it's, on the other hand, it's good to hear from the community. So maybe there's some way we can work this out where they can, not during the meeting, but we can have some input.
Thank you, Roberta. And, I think you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. Is that
Just to clarify also, we don't need the chat for the raise hand function. People can raise their hands the way it is right now.
Yeah. I'm just going to finalize and say there's just a diverse set of opinions, so, we're going to try and come up with something that's the best case for all. I do think, our goal is to maximize community involvement, but at the same time, be thoughtful and measured about the way we do things. And there are different ways to look at this. It doesn't, there are ways for us to explore beyond chat. There's other functionality in chat. And I want to emphasize that we are going to get a recommendation from the borough president in terms of ideas, and we're going to talk to other community boards. So whatever we decide will not be in a silo. It will be with broad sort of thoughts and broad feedback. And it may evolve as iterate as we go along, because this is sort of a new way that we're working together, and we'll have to continue so. I will say one thing that I do think that the one area that I don't think we need to facilitate is when one attendee is talking to another attendee. That's one-on-one. That's not our role to facilitate somebody talking to another person. The role is to facilitate community involvement, talking into the board and doing things. But we've seen some banter back and forth, and I'm not so sure. Again, I'm just expressing my personal opinion. I don't speak for the whole executive team, but when you're going back and forth between two people, I don't know if that's our role to provide that type of outlet for people to go back and forth. I think our role is to maximize community involvement in what we do, and I think that's what we're going to do, and we're going to be thoughtful and measured about it. Okay, I wanted to also say, we're going to move on, but if there's people in the community that want to share, my suggestion is that they can send an email. Now I don't have an email yet, so, but I plan on working with the board. There is an email that's office@cb7.org. I plan on working with them to get those. I don't have a CB7 email because I've been working very quickly. But my feeling is if we're going to have a lot of, I think, conversation around our next topic, I'd like to move on. And if people have opinions on how they want us to take into consideration the chat, I would emphasize or recommend that they email office@cb7.org, and we will take that into consideration at the executive committee. So I wanted to move on to the next topic, which is the 59th Street homeless shelter. And the purpose of putting this on was really just to clarify some facts. I think when it first came out, I got some emails from both the public and some committee members. I also know the article in the RAG was, I don't think purposely done so, but the way it was worded, I thought it may not have sort of convened the facts as we know them. So what I just wanted to do was spend a little bit of time just letting everyone know the facts. I sent out the letter that got sent to us so that everyone saw it. And I'm going to give it to Mark for a few minutes because some of this started before I became chair. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about where I'm at as chair, and then I'm going to talk about the future.
Thank you, Stephen. Obviously, this is one of the first things that Stephen and I have been transitioning quite a bit. And obviously, this is one of the first topics that we wanted to work on. So the facts that I want to emphasize are that we did receive a very bare bones notification from the Department of Homeless Services the day before New Year's Eve. It alerted us essentially to the address of not a proposed shelter. They make the decisions. I guess that's the first thing to start with, is that this is not different than other DHS encounters in that they make decisions and then tell us about them. They're not asking us for our input. There will be no resolution in front of you to say, do you approve? I received this notification along with Penny, is a letter, and then there was also a phone call where I was able to ask a few questions because the letter raised more questions than it answered. Whatever your opinions are of fair share analysis, and that's a conversation for another day, but there was no fair share analysis included in what they presented to us. They provided us with a sketch of the intended population for this shelter, which, by the way, was very different than what has been reported in some of the media, but not others of the media. And so the first thing that I did was to ask for more information so that we could understand, first of all, what committee to bring this to and what conversation should be had about it. I was also mindful of the fact that in 4 days or 5 days from that conversation, we'd be electing a new chair. And so I didn't think that it would be appropriate for me to preempt any of the discussions or so forth. So the first thing I did was to put it on the list of things that I would transition with Stephen on. Well, I mean, I didn't know it was Stephen at that time, but you know, the other thing that I personally feel is appropriate to emphasize was that this was scheduled to open in 2024, which would be halfway through the administration of the next mayor. And so for once we have a moment to take our breath and not to be in a complete reactionary mode, and instead to be thoughtful and careful about this. The final thing I'll mention is that to the extent that there were in conversation as opposed to in the text of the letter, there was a sketch of the single women that were going to be served by this new facility. It is exactly what we lost on 107th Street. Obviously, that all needs to be confirmed. There was an incredibly successful community-supported shelter up on 107th Street for employed women. And so it was my understanding that that was what they were going to be coming back to us with. Doesn't mean we would, you know, be bound by anything about anything, but it was a situation where it would be appropriate to take our time and ask for more information. And so that's what I started to do then. And then as soon as Stephen and I started transitioning, that's what we've continued to talk about doing. And then I'll let Stephen pick it up from there. Obviously,
thank you.
I'm available to your questions for my part of this, but I don't want to be in the way for the remaining conversations that need to be had going forward.
Thank you. And just so everyone understands timing, this period of time for Mark, I think, is 8 days. So this was a very short period of time. And then it led to the full to the meeting in which I'm transitioning. And a couple things. I read the article in the RAG as well as you guys. I did clarify with them because I think it alluded somehow that either we had not commented and or that we did not present at the board meeting. And I tried to just clarify that we're gathering information. So that's our comment. Nobody reached out to me. Nobody reached out to anybody for a comment. So I just thought it was unusual that they said they're waiting for feedback. And that, look, our next steps are we're in a gathering information. The letter is very sort of simple and bare boned in terms of information. I think we have to get a lot more information. And the next steps are we are putting together we're reaching out and putting together a letter to the services. I welcome any thoughts and things that people wanted to be added in that. And we're hoping to set up a meeting. But we are, to emphasize a couple points that Mark made, we're at the very beginning steps. This is a 2024 scheduled, so it doesn't even mean it will be 2024. So this is now 3 years away. So we're at the very beginning stages. We will work with the appropriate committees. We're a committee group. So I had a quick conversation with Shelley. We'll figure out of HHS. We'll figure out if this is more than that committee as well. But like we always do, we will drive those conversations, those community involvement, those discussions through the proper committees moving forward. But there is not a lot for us to answer because we don't have the questions. And I think one of the reasons why Mark decided not to discuss it at the last board was because of that. And I was reticent to even put this on this meeting other than the fact that it seemed to come out and people had questions. And I thought it was the right thing just to acknowledge that we are aware of this, that we are seeking comment, we are seeking information, and we're going to start a long journey to do this in a very thoughtful manner. The only other, so I'm just going to comment on one thing, and then we're going to open it up for questions for committee members as well as the community. The only thing I wanted to comment on is I've been privy to a couple, from time to time, I've seen questions coming from the community. So I just wanted to clarify what Mark said. Our involvement in the decision-making process of opening up this shelter, and that is we don't have a role in that process right now. So if you are supportive and happy about this shelter, we don't deserve a congratulations because we weren't involved in the process. And if you're unhappy with it, we don't deserve that as well. We are not in the process. What we can control is today moving forward, we will be part of this and we will be part of this conversation. But please realize that we have asked to be in the room. I think we'd like to be more involved, but we are not. So our process, our involvement starts when we got that letter, and it's going to be on a move forward. And I hope that we could all recall that, because I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding that somehow we've been involved in these conversations behind the scenes and we're not listening to people, and we're just not. That's just not factually correct. So let's open it up first to members, and then to the community as well. But I think, again, I just wanted to clarify, my purpose was just to speak to the facts. We don't have a lot of other information other than those are the facts, and we're getting more information. So I'm going to now open up, and I see, I'm just going to go to the top. So Doug, I have Doug, then I have Clary, I have Michelle, I see Roberta. People may raise their hand more as we move along.
And Ethel's name is, my name's, I've raised my hand. Thank you.
Okay, some people are going up. Well, I'll make sure I get to everybody. So Doug, do you want to start first?
I just wanted to mention that unlike some of the other, the temporary shelters within the hotels where there was no real community advisory board, this particular letter from the city encourages the community advisory board, which is going to be for every single facility. And I think that's a very good thing. So we have a tremendous amount of, and to your point, we're going to have a new mayor, we're going to have a new borough president, new city council, there'll be different community board members. This is years away, but we do have there will be a community advisory board formed, and that is great.
Thank you, Doug. Clary, you're next.
Yeah, I actually have to leave the meeting in just a moment. So thank you for indulging that. But while we've all had concerns about how diverting in a negative way the chat is, I have seen a couple questions from the public about their inability to thus far to have seen this letter. So I just wanted to suggest, can we put this letter on our website?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we can do that.
That's all I want to say.
Today.
And I think I'm leaving. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, everyone heard We will put the letter up so that the public can see it as well in the coming days. I see Michelle. Ethel, I see your hand raised. I'm going to go down. I'll make sure I get to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Actually, this project is not a long time away from now. Time seems to be going quicker in this pandemic. May I suggest that we contact or ask Project Renewal, who is managing this, the center. I think they'll come to a board meeting and talk to us about what they're providing.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I mean, whether it's at a committee meeting or a board meeting,
Yeah.
but I think getting them to see. I
Yeah.
see other people with their hands raised. I'm just going to go to a couple more. I see both Roberta and Ethel. Let me move forward on the digital, and then we'll go to you guys afterwards. So, oh, well, Roberta, you are next. So, Roberta, you're
I think that they've contacted us so early in the game is good. And I think, you know, we have to push now to be part of the process. They're obviously tearing down a building and building a new shelter, which is good. And I think if we can be part of the process early on, we can make sure that it works for the community. The problem with 107th Street was that it took a while to build up a community that was supportive of the shelter. They had a wonderful relationship. There was a local church. There were all sorts of community people that were involved. And suddenly, you know, 2 weeks before it happened, they announced that they were dissolving the shelter and bringing in men, and it created great havoc. So I think there's a local community that could be very supportive. And I think if we start now and we create a working group, we can make this a win-win for our community rather than something that everyone's going to feel hatred towards.
Thank you. Let's go to Ethel, and then we'll go to Courtney after Ethel.
Thank you. I just want to echo a couple of the last comments. It's a little different, it seems to me, that the notification has occurred. While it's 2 years, it seems like a long time away, but then on the other hand, it isn't such a long time away. It seems unusual that they are doing this. And secondly, Project Renewal is an agency that is well known in Board 7 as well and around the city. So I would echo what has been said in the last two comments, and that is to go and answer the letter and ask for, I would say, a small meeting to begin with of the chairs and the appropriate co-chairs, and ask them to understand what they can tell you now. And at that meeting, then develop a communication and process scenario with them. It's an opportunity, but and it sounds like a good one, at least for communication. On the other hand, it is unusual for them to be doing this. So I can't help but wonder about some of the political aspects of them doing this in a mayoral year and seeming to communicate and maybe just paying lip service. In any case, it's worth responding quickly, asking for a small meeting with appropriate people, and then saying we will go from there, depending on the nature of the meeting. But really asking it very clearly and specifically and with the right people.
Thank you, Ethel, and I agree. That's a very good idea, and we'll include that in the letter. Courtney.
Yeah, I actually would echo some of what Ethel just said, but go a little further. My push would be, what can this board do now? And I do think urgency is needed because it's not that far away. What can we do to ensure DHS comes to the table now and not 30 days before a move-in? And I would remind everyone that we have in our DNS a call out for the need for transparency from DHS. So we have the ability to speak to this issue right now. We need that information. We deserve that voice. And frankly, I'd argue we needed it before the purchase happened. We shouldn't be getting more information from the West Side RAG than we do get from the agency itself. So I would challenge us as a board, what are we going to do? what should be our plan of action, because we've been told, unilaterally informed here, that this purchase has happened, that it's just been made to place 200 women suffering from what we're told maybe are mental health issues in a site right next to a playground, a rec center with an array of school, all of these issues that we should have a voice in talking about. And this board really does need to have a sense of urgency in terms of speaking up and having their voice on this topic. It's incredibly important that we not wait.
Thanks, Courtney. And I certainly can say that the plan is to send the letter out immediately, very, very quickly and start the process. And, we certainly we'll be eager to sort of get answers as well. Robert, I see a finger up. Is that a hand raise or? I didn't know if you were telling me, wait a minute, but I'll give it to you.
It was camouflage. I'm going to bank off of Courtney and really supporting Roberta's recommendation and the immediacy that work group be named instantly, and that DHS be invited to meet the work group and get our part of the bargain going. But the urgency, and that it be in the form of a work group, which I'd like to serve on, Shelley. And so that it's the urgency and immediacy of that response to that RAG article. And that we should have, that's another matter, that we should have heard it from them, yada, yada, but that our response is right now, tomorrow, we're ready to meet with you because we have formed a work group on that particular shelter. And we want to help you design it accordingly and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Robert. Louisa, I see you have 2 fingers, so you're one-upping Robert to the now 5 fingers, so you're up.
This is a point of information. How does the Community Advisory Board actually work? What would it be composed of? Who would be on it? And how much impact do they usually have?
I don't have an answer to that. They mentioned in the letter.
Shelley does.
A committee advisory board is after the fact. So what you want to do is create something before the fact.
I'll speak for a minute, then I'll let you speak, Shelley. So the letter does allude to speaks to a community advisory board. Shelley can speak to the history of that. I don't know exactly what the more details. One of the specific things we want to understand more is what is that? What's the timing? All the things, and I think that's something we can add.
Right.
And Shelley, if you want to just share a few minutes on context of that.
Yeah, it's very common, and we've participated in many of them. As was said, the Community Advisory Board is formed when the shelter opens. It includes members of the Community Board, representatives of the elected officials, community groups, block associations, institutions, and other groupings within that area, and usually meets initially monthly or bi-monthly and brings forth the issues of concern and gets information to share with the community. So it serves both two-way communication. We find out what they're saying, what's happening to share with the community, and we get to ask the questions. So that's wonderful, but it's not going to affect what goes on till 2024.
Got it.
We need a structure where we have ongoing conversation from the community board with them, or else we'll be left out of the loop. And hopefully, if we do, we'll be able to encourage them to speak, as we have with others, to the rec center, to John Jay, to the schools, and to all the people who use the playground, if there is a Friends of group, so that the community immediately surrounding is not left out, okay? It's intimately involved and intimately informed all along. So I think we can serve a very special purpose, not just in communicating for ourselves, but communicating for or help facilitating the communication for the community surrounding the planned shelter. We should also, by the way, check with the city government as to where the funds came from all of a sudden to build a new building, which is wonderful, but it's a little curious.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Paige, you've raised your hand. Paige? You have to unmute yourself or it's a
You're
false
muted.
raise. Can you-
There we go. Looking at all these faces here, I remember sitting on many meetings about Jewish Home Life Care, 108th Street, Columbia School when it was built, and fundamentals that the committee needs to just make a shopping list is, as Shelley alluded to, start with the money. Where did the project come from? How did it fall out of the sky? Did they assemble a parcel? Will it be owned in perpetuity? Is it going to be managed by someone else? How many people are in it? Will they be dispensing medication and medical services for the women? What happens to an ambulance bay? Because it's a very tight street coming off the West Side Highway. So there's a whole list. I'm sure the community board can copy what we had done before just to get Steve and some of the new members up to speed. And I can tell you right now, every single one of you is going to have a role because there's a piece that will impact every single committee, even how food is going to be delivered, where the trash goes, everything. I never anticipated when I joined the board in 2005, that was my first task. And to be honest, I nearly quit. It's such a hard nut because you want to be the best you can be to make it happen. So Shelley, thank you for reminding me. I just heard your voice and I was back there 15 years ago all over again. Anyway, I'll be a resource. If I can find some of these documents, Steve, I'll share them with you and send the original shopping list because I think that's a great starting point. And of course, it's more sophisticated now, so you're going to get more.
Thanks. And you're going to, if you want to send those questions, you lost me at 3. I'm not that quick a writer, so I'll look
Don't
for
worry. I have it in my head. As I said,
I
this
was
is a great
going as
opportunity.
quickly as possible. So
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, but scary as hell. And Courtney, good on you.
great. So I'm eager. There's a couple people in the audience. I don't know. I see Michelle. I don't know if your hand is re-raised, and I don't know if there was a couple people that wanted to add on. I'd ask that it be brief because I think we want to move on. But if you have a brief comment, please, Michelle.
Thank you. I just want to tell you I'm available to help in any way possible.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a couple attendees. Mark, I'm going to ask for your help. I know that Megan and Jenna have their hands raised. Can they just speak or do we promote or just remind me of the nuances?
We have been promoting folks to when there are a manageable number. So with your permission, I'll do that now.
Yeah, so let's promote Megan and Jenna. They have their cyber hands raised.
Very good.
Okay, Megan, pleasure to see you again, and you can speak first.
Okay. And I have someone with me, so we're gonna speak together.
Sure.
Okay. So I am glad that we're talking about the nuances of this shelter. I want to talk about the shelter. I also want to talk about the chat and as a community member, because I think that, you know, I do hear from your point of view as a board, but I think that what I read in the chat and the point of view from a community member is that I don't think that maybe the board members here from our perspective is perhaps that we feel, and I don't want to speak for the community, but I want to speak for at least people that I know that I do speak with, is that there is a sense of a lack of transparency. And, you know, I have been attending many meetings over the past 6 months. And, you know, this is a sentiment that's not just felt on board meetings, full board meetings, subcommittee. I mean, this is many meetings. This is being sort of downgraded to, you know, less than 60 seconds while certain topics are allowed to be discussed for well over 90 minutes, even though the community is asking for, you know, certain topics to have longer discussions. And so I think that this should be taken into consideration when, you know, looking to disable a function that, you know, does give the community more ability to interact and to participate in this process. So I just think that's something that's important. The other thing that I did want to touch upon is the shelter that, of course, you know, I think that the elephant in the room is the mental health crisis that we're all experiencing right now. And, you know, what has not been discussed tonight is that horrific event that happened over the weekend, where in our own district, a man was over a dozen people who've witnessed electrocuted in our subway system. And so I've been on these transportation committees. I've never heard anything discussed about the crime in our subways. And this is now going to be, we're now discussing a facility that could host 200 potentially mentally ill individuals that has, significant consequences in our community. And I have participated in the CB1 meetings when Jocelyn Carter from DHS did discuss the process by which a permanent shelter was cited. And it certainly was not just that a provider bought a building and that was it. And then we all just, moved on and decided, and that was the end of the story. So the way she described it to the community was that there was a bidding process, that there was a discussion with the community board, a discussion with the community. And so I really am just kind of feeling also frustrated and a lot of the same sentiment that maybe some of you described, that a little suspicious about the idea that Project Renewal, who is a well-known actor, maybe I personally don't believe is a provider that has had a lot of transparency in our community. And so the idea that they have now been awarded what really is probably a very good economic situation to them, and opening in maybe 2 years, which seems far away, not far away though, agreed. We can do better. I mean, this is part of where the community needs to step up. And I think the community board, particularly, you all need to, say like, why were we not informed? Why were we not part of this process? And buying this building in secret, it smells bad. And so we should all really be taking a look at this.
Thank you, Megan. And just to clarify, just a couple comments, and starting with the latter, I'm not sure about other community boards in that instance, but I can confirm that we were not part of the process. We were not part of a bidding process. We were not part of choosing who the vendor would be. I can tell you that everyone on this Zoom, including our HHS, wants to be part of that process. And I can tell you that that has been made as a statement numerous times in front of me. So I can only talk about what I'm going to do moving forward, but I will confirm that we were not part of that process, factually speaking. And then just speaking to just the bigger thing about being, the community being listened. Look, I understand your thoughts. We're doing everything we can. It is important. Yourself have shown up on many meetings, and we've allowed you. You've always spoken. So I think that's certainly a testament to the fact that we're doing the best we can. The one thing I would encourage you is one of the things that's hard is at a full board meeting, there is limited time. The meetings go long, as you know, and they go very long. What I do is in the committee meeting, the full board, but the committee meetings are really an opportunity to have a much more in-length conversation. And if you feel passionate about something about transportation, I can't guarantee you, but I am confident that you'll have a good opportunity to speak. I will speak that I was at the transportation. Andrew gave a really good update. He did talk about crime in his update, so I'm sure that he would talk about it as well. He had a full agenda. But I would again say that, and I've seen you at committees, but so that's a little bit of a better to have a more in-depth conversation. But again, we're going to continue to do as we can. We're talking about the chat today because we want to be transparent about talking about the chat. And we think there's some challenges, but we also think it's a great tool, and we're going to do our best to come up with a good balance. And we thank you for coming, and we encourage you to continue to come, and you can bring more partners next time. And maybe you'll have a full house. Thank you again, Megan. Jenna, your opportunity to speak.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the fact that, one, I thought the idea to allow the community to vote on things that are happening so that the community could speak to things and really show their involvement in the community. I understand it's difficult to follow chat. Maybe things can be done around that, but I do think it's been useful to put your point of view in, ask questions. I've seen people reference that, someone said something in chat. So maybe there's some things that need to be policed better. Maybe there's other things that need to be done. But overall, I have seen people point to it. So it's obviously being used for good. And I would argue and say COVID has given us a lot of bad things, but maybe one of the good things is, as a mother of a young child, I can attend these meetings that go a long time. And I couldn't do that if they were all in person, because you can't leave your child alone in your apartment. So that is one of the benefits of having things virtually. And as a mother, I think that's super important, and I hope the community respects that. And then with regards to the homeless shelter, I just have a few questions. I'm a little confused because I have listened to some other community boards. I have kind of read some documents. Is the December 30th notification a 30-day notification ahead of time? And I've seen DHS ask the community for buildings, for recommendations for spaces. What are they doing with those recommendations if they go and buy a building without talking to the community first? Like, what's the point of them asking us for our involvement if they go and do things without speaking to us first? It doesn't really sound like our involvement matters much.
Stephen, can I answer?
Sure. How about if I just speak very quickly to a couple things, and then I'll be happy to have yourself or Mark also speak. I'm just speaking factually to the fact that the letter that we got on the 30th was just notifying us. So that's what we got, and it was the timing that we received it. We did not play a role in any of the decision makings before. We do put out comments such as a DNS and other areas, and we hope that they listen. But I'm just clarifying that we were not in this particular opportunity involved in the decision making, and we'd be happy if you want to advocate with DHS that we should be in the room, because we think so. Roberta, if you want to add something as well, please do. And
No, I think it's important. If the community wants to advocate, that's a great idea. Unfortunately, and Mark and I both know that DHS kind of does what it wants to do when it wants to do it. And it's a problem. And, you know, community activists are always great. I was one before I joined the community board. And it's very important to be an activist and to speak out on a level that community board cannot do. But unfortunately, you know, the mayor has a program where he wants to create a certain number of shelters for homeless people, which is not a bad idea. But it would, of course, be a great idea if the community was involved. And that is certainly a major problem with which Mark and Stephen and Shelley and all of us who've been involved with this have known for a long time.
Thanks. Is it Mark, you wanted to add something, or?
Just by way of emphasis, that Stephen is exactly correct, at least during my tenure, that the citing question was not something that was brought to us. Reasonable minds can have a conversation about whether it should be, but it was not. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted us to have more information before we shared it, shared news of this, because we, you know, the kinds of information that everybody has been asking for in this conversation and in all the conversations that followed the West Side Rag article are exactly what we were asking for. That was what is in the letter that is in the draft stage to follow up, which is essentially to formalize the things that we asked for right away.
And Mark, the scary thing is that the RAG had information we didn't have.
Well, they have information that's different than what we have. I wouldn't
Right,
go
we
to.
don't know if that's true or not.
So it underscores my view that we shouldn't publicize information that we're not confident of.
Exactly.
Because who knows? Maybe what I was told is correct, and
maybe
and maybe not. And so that's precisely why it was prudent to use just a little bit of the time that was available to us to make sure that we weren't taking back something that we said to the public and wanted to be sure. Now, I also think it's important to note that CB7 does not have a position because we weren't consulted. The whole point of this is to be useful to our entire community going forward, and however that takes shape is how that'll take shape. We should start that process with the right information and the right leadership, and I think we have both right now in the works. I see Shelley has
the other thing, Stephen, that's very important is that we can shape this. So this may be a good thing, but we need to find out more information, and we need to be part of it so that CB7 can say, okay, we shaped this in a way that makes it good, or we shaped it in a way and we're opposed to it. But at this point, we can't make any decisions.
Thank you, Roberta and Mark. Shelley, do you want to sort of make, I don't know if it's closing statements, but
Sure.
we wrap it up.
Just in response to the 30-day issue. This was not the 30-day letter, okay? But going back yearly to when I was chair of the board, I met with Mayor Bloomberg and I explained to him that these things just come at us and we need 60-day notice or more. And he compromised and said 30. And since then, except for the emergency situations, we've been getting 30-day notice. It's inadequate, but it's something. This was an unusual piece coming in a letter to our district manager informing us maybe they're trying to be more transparent, but it's an opening for a beginning of communication. So let's take advantage of it.
Thank you, Shelley. So Jenna, just wrapping it up, you know, you're getting confirmation from multiple past chairs. You know, we were not in the room. We can only tell you that we very much want to, and we are aligned in both your desire and our desire to be part of the process, and we're doing everything we can. And you could certainly advocate for yourself as an individual communities, and we would love it if you advocate that the Community Board 7 should be part of the process as well. Because
Where should I advocate
we're aligned
to?
in that.
Like as a community board member, as a community member, where should I advocate to? Like, to be honest, the elected officials don't really answer any emails, so I'm not really sure who I should speak to if I wanted to advocate for this at all.
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, the regular, and if somebody has a thing, I mean, I think the regular people are the electeds. You can reach out to the committee, the agency directly. I don't know how much that'll change, to be honest. We don't get always the response we want. I can only assure you that when we reach out, we talk about not just our desire as a community board, but the desire to have the community itself. So we do advocate for us, but I would continue. I don't know, both either Roberta or Mark have a suggestion on the specific person, but I don't have a magic person that will be more communicative.
Email cb7@office.com.
Well, that's how to get a hold of us. I got to say, Stephen, that the city agencies respond to the mayor.
Mhm.
And so the probably completely unsatisfactory answer to that question is that advocacy needs to go to the mayor. Our elected officials, if we brought this to the attention of our more local elected officials, our borough president and council members, what they would be doing is bringing it to the mayoral agency and the mayor himself as well. So I'm sorry to say that that's the best answer I can think of, but I defer to other colleagues who have more experience.
But I think it's also important to, if you send it to somebody, CC CB7, so we have a copy of it.
Jen, if you want to just send an email to the office so we have it, if after this, if people have ideas, I will follow up. But we'd be delighted if you advocated for yourself as well as us. We think that would be a much better process.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everyone from the community, and I think that's the agenda. So I will put out new business.
Even there is one raised hand in the attendees.
Okay, I'll go back to that. Okay, Jackie, do we need to promote? I think we'll have to promote Jackie Moffitt. I think they must have put their hand out after the original hands, which is fine.
In the works.
I didn't see it. Okay, Jackie, you are promoted, and you're free to speak. You gotta unmute yourself, though.
Mute.
There
Can
you
you
go.
hear me now?
We sure can.
So I hear you on the frustration that if you're not involved in the decision to site a shelter here on the Upper West Side, I'd love to see the board become more involved in that. But given that we are now very much, we have a lot of shelters. We are 5 of 59. We have more than our fair share. I'd like to see the board re-examine their decision to bring safe havens to the Upper West Side. Does anyone have anything to say about that?
I can only note that you've shared it. I'll talk to the HHS heads. I don't think we're prepared to have a quick knee-jerk decision on anything, but I will certainly note your request and we can have a conversation about that.
I think just to amplify it, I think the community feels that safe havens are a magnet for homeless everywhere, that they are brought to the Upper West Side, and we are suffering grave harm from the amount of crime and danger that we're experiencing in our streets. So this uproar that you're hearing is started when we weren't told of the hotels being used as shelters. Now we're finding out about another shelter in the West Side Rag. We are at capacity. And so we're asking you, and I'm representing myself and a lot of the people who are members of organizations who really feel unsafe in the Upper West Side, to really reconsider the idea of safe havens. We are at capacity on the Upper West Side.
Okay. Well, your request is noted, and thank you, for making it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Is there anyone else that I'm missing? I think we're good. I'm looking. Okay. So I will move on just to any new
Melinda,
business.
Sorry, Melinda said she wanted to speak. Melinda Thaler.
Okay, Doug, we're gonna start to wrap it up. I don't see any hands raised. If there's a last minute hand, Melinda, let's promote Melinda. That's going to be the last one because I think it's time to move on. And I don't see any other hands, so this is going to be the last person.
Melinda's being promoted.
Thank you. And Melinda, please speak.
Okay.
You're up.
I just wanted to also say, when you encourage us to provide you with feedback and email with you information and advocate for ourselves, there is a problem in some of the information that is disseminated from the board to the community that hampers our ability to participate. And specifically, I've been having an ongoing correspondence with John Martinez about the fact that the full board meeting agendas have not been posted in 7 months. Since July of last year, the full board agendas are not on the CB7 website. For tonight's steering committee meeting, there was an announcement that the meeting was being held tonight at 6:30, and then it said, click here for the agenda. And when you clicked on that link, it brought you to a page that said, steering committee, period, with nothing more. And so I said, oh, you must have put the wrong link in. Can you please direct me to the agenda? I also don't like Melissa Rosenberg making these obscene gestures while I'm speaking. Thank you. And so John Martinez wrote back to me and said that he doesn't have the agenda because a lot of the board members haven't gotten it together yet, and that it would be posted this morning, but that I have to realize the board members have families and jobs and can't always get the agenda up. But we have families and jobs too. And if you're asking us to advocate and participate and be part of these meetings, then you have to give us the agenda longer than like 20 hours before the meeting starts. There needs to, and you can't not put up full board agendas for 7 months and have the most recent agenda be from July of 2020. There needs to be an improved information flow.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. We will address agendas. Number two, I did see the email to John. I'm not sure if you sort of clarified that exactly as I read it as well, but he did answer you fairly quickly. And again, there's no need, we would just ask that we focus on, let's focus on conversations at your needs and not bring up other people. It's the type of conversations that we're trying to just stay focused. So thank you for sharing your concern. It is duly noted. We will look at the agendas. I did see John responded to you, so I know there's at least a conversation. I'm happy in that. And I will meet with John and have a bit of a conversation and see to get to the bottom of that. So thank you for sharing with that. Okay, I am going to move on now, and we're going to go to new business. Is there any new business?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yeah, remind everybody who has to renew their membership.
Thank you. So that's a good point. That's why I told you to remind me. Just a reminder that if you are a board member and this is your year, remember that you have to apply for your renewal, and it's around the corner. It's February 1st. So we would hate to lose anybody due to technicality. So it's just a gentle reminder to all of us to kind of just double check. And I think there's some processes that you can do so. But again, just if you think that you have to put in your renewal paper, please do so.
Yeah, if you just write to April at Gail's office, she'll send you the link.
Great.
Steve, is that available somewhere else? Because I've written to April. I haven't heard back. Maybe.
I will speak to April. Generally, I just know my process is once a year. I used to get a couple emails. So if nobody's gotten emails, I'll be happy to shoot April a note and just say, can you please just, I'll speak to her and ask her to send it to everyone, that there is sort of a mixed smattering of, we didn't get it. And as a reminder, I have a little bit of a dialogue going with her, and I'll be happy to do that.
There's a link on Gail's website. So you don't have to do an email. You can just go in there and click.
Okay, I found it on Gail's website. It was there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great.
And one more new business thing is that we are going to have a town hall. Our committee will figure out a date, and everybody to all of the community who's concerned, and you can read that in the chat about what's being done or what can be done by an advisory committee to help and support our retail and restaurants. Please be there that night. That'll be the time at the town hall that you're actually going to have a voice to talk as long as you want. Hopefully not that long, but anyway, but that's that. So we'll get you dates and everything. One more thing about steering in response to Melinda. We never used to put up the until like the night before for steering, not full board, but the agenda. That was just how it was done, because steering was about a review and setting up the next meeting. It was not this kind of format in earlier times, prior to pre-pandemic times.
Thank you, Linda. Any other new business? Okay, well, I think that is our meeting.
To adjourn.
Motion to, second.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Steve.
Oh my gosh.